The morning sun painted the mountains of Afghanistan in shades of gold and orange. Captain Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his binoculars and scanned the valley below. His unit had been tracking a Taliban sniper for 3 weeks. This ghost shooter had killed 4 American soldiers and wounded 6 others. Each shot came from impossible distances, each kill was clean, and each time the shooter vanished without a trace. "Sir, we've got movement at 2 o'clock, whispered Sergeant Kelly, pointing toward a cluster of rocks about 800 meters away. Rodriguez focused his scope on the area. Nothing, just rocks, dust, and the endless Afghan landscape that had swallowed so many secrets. The unit consisted of 12 elite marksmen, each with years of combat experience. They were the best America had to offer. Rodriguez had personally selected each member. There was Thompson, who could hit a target at 1,200 meters in a sandstorm. Martinez had over 200 confirmed kills. Jackson could thread a needle at 900 meters. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were predators, trained to hunt the most dangerous game on Earth. But this Taliban sniper was different. Intelligence reports suggested it might be a foreign fighter, possibly Chechen or Pakistani, someone with advanced training. The shots were too precise, too calculated for a typical insurgent. Each kill shot had been a headshot from distances exceeding 1,000 meters. In the harsh conditions of Afghanistan, with wind, dust, and heat creating optical illusions, such accuracy seemed almost supernatural. The team had set up in an abandoned village called Kaler. The stone buildings provided good cover and clear sight lines across the valley. They'd been here for 2 days, waiting for the ghost to make another appearance. The villagers had fled months ago, leaving behind empty houses and memories of simpler times. Rodriguez studied his men through his peripheral vision. They were restless. Professional soldiers hated waiting almost as much as they hated losing. And they were losing this fight. The Taliban sniper had outmaneuvered them at every turn. It was personal now. Among the team was a new addition that Rodriguez wasn't entirely comfortable with. Private Sarah Chun had been assigned to them just a week ago. She was quiet, almost invisible. At 19, she was the youngest member of the unit and the only woman. Her file showed exceptional marksmanship scores, but paper meant nothing in real combat. The other soldiers largely ignored her, which seemed to suit her fine. Chun kept to herself, always positioned at the edge of the group. She rarely spoke unless spoken to directly. When she did talk, her voice was soft, measured. She had an unusual habit of studying the wind patterns for hours, watching how dust moved across the landscape, how heat waves distorted vision. The others found it odd. Rodriguez found it concerning. The silence was broken by a distant crack. A rifle shot echoed across the valley. Then, screaming, not from their position, but from somewhere far below. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see smoke rising from what appeared to be a vehicle. Another target, another impossible shot. "That's at least 1,500 meters, Martinez muttered, lowering his scope. "Nobody makes that shot in these conditions." Rodriguez felt the familiar knot of frustration in his stomach. They were elite hunters being systematically embarrassed by a single opponent. Each miss, each failed attempt to locate the enemy sniper, chipped away at their confidence and reputation. As the day wore on, the team took turns scanning different sectors. They worked in pairs, methodically covering every possible hiding spot. The Taliban sniper had to be somewhere in this valley. Physics and geography limited the possible positions. But, somehow, the ghost remained invisible. Private Chin volunteered for the overnight watch. Rodriguez paired her with Thompson, figuring the veteran could keep an eye on the rookie. As darkness fell over the mountains, the temperature dropped 30 degrees. The clear night air would provide better shooting conditions, but it also meant the enemy would likely be more active. Rodriguez settled into his sleeping bag, but sleep wouldn't come. Something about this mission felt wrong. They weren't just hunting a sniper anymore. They were being hunted in return. The ghost knew they were here, knew their positions, and seemed to be waiting for something. But what? In the distance, a wolf howled. The sound echoed off the mountains, lonely and wild. Rodriguez closed his eyes and tried to push away the feeling that tomorrow would bring either a breakthrough or a tragedy. In Afghanistan, those two outcomes were often the same thing. Dawn broke with the sound of gunfire. Not the sharp crack of a sniper rifle, but the rapid chatter of assault weapons. Rodriguez jerked awake to find Thompson shaking him violently. Contact! Contact! We've got Taliban moving up the North Ridge. Thompson shouted over the noise. Rodriguez grabbed his rifle and scrambled to the window. Through the morning haze, he could see muzzle flashes dancing among the rocks about 600 meters away. At least a dozen insurgents were advancing on their position. This wasn't random. Someone had given away their location. Where's Chun? Rodriguez barked, doing a quick head count of his men. Haven't seen her since 0300, Thompson replied, firing controlled bursts toward the enemy position. She said she was checking the south perimeter. Rodriguez felt ice in his veins. The south perimeter was exactly where their Taliban sniper would logically position for an attack on their hideout. If Chun had walked into an ambush, she was either dead or captured. Neither option was acceptable. The firefight intensified as more Taliban fighters joined the attack. They were using the standard insurgent tactic of fix and flank. Keep the Americans pinned down with frontal assault while moving around their sides. It usually worked against smaller units. But Rodriguez's team weren't ordinary soldiers. Martinez and Jackson took position on the second floor and began picking off Taliban fighters with methodical precision. Each shot was a kill. Thompson and Williams covered the northern approach with overlapping fields of fire. The Taliban advance stalled, then began to retreat. Sir, I've got visual on someone moving through the rocks about 800 meters south, called Martinez from his perch. Single person, low crawling toward that cluster of boulders. Rodriguez swung his scope toward the indicated area. The morning sun created shifting shadows that made identification difficult. But there was definitely movement. Someone was out there, someone who hadn't been there the night before. Take the shot if you have a clear target, Rodriguez ordered. Martinez adjusted his scope, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder. 800 meters away, a small puff of dust marked where the bullet struck rock. Mississippi dam wind shifted, Martinez muttered, making adjustments. He fired again. Another miss. The target had disappeared behind a boulder. Over the next hour, the team took turns trying to eliminate the mysterious figure moving through the rocks. Thompson fired 3 shots. All misses. Jackson tried twice, both bullets finding only stone and dirt. Williams attempted a difficult shot at 900 meters. The bullet kicked up dust 2 feet to the left of the target. Rodriguez was starting to suspect they'd found their ghost sniper. The movement patterns were too professional, too calculated for an ordinary Taliban fighter. Whoever was out there knew exactly how to use terrain, shadows, and timing to stay alive. But something was bothering him. In all their attempts to hit the target, not a single return shot had come their way. The figure seemed more interested in observation than engagement, almost like reconnaissance rather than attack. Sir, we've got a problem, Williams called from the radio position. I'm monitoring Taliban communications, and they're talking about pulling back. They're saying something about the American girl being in position. Rodriguez felt his blood turn cold. The American girl. Chun. But that would mean. His thoughts were interrupted by the distant crack of a high-powered rifle. Not aimed at them, but somewhere far to the east. Then, another shot, and another. Someone was engaging targets at extreme range. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see Taliban fighters on distant ridgelines suddenly taking cover. Panic was spreading through their ranks. They were receiving accurate fire from a position none of them could locate. Martinez, can you identify the source of those shots? Martinez spent several minutes scanning with his scope. Negative, sir. Whoever's shooting is beyond my visual range. Has to be at least 2,000 meters, maybe more. The Taliban assault on their position had completely collapsed. Fighters were retreating in all directions, abandoning equipment and wounded comrades. Someone was systematically destroying their entire operation from an impossible distance. Rodriguez tried to raise Chun on the radio. Static. He tried again. Nothing. As the afternoon wore on, the long-range shooting continued sporadically. Each shot seemed to hit its target. Intelligence chatter indicated that Taliban commanders were being eliminated one by one. Someone was decapitating their entire command structure with surgical precision. But the most disturbing aspect was the shooting positions. Based on the angles of attack, the sniper was moving between shots, covering distances that should take hours in mere minutes. Either there were multiple snipers working in coordination, or one person was achieving something that defied normal tactical understanding. As evening approached, Rodriguez made a decision that went against every instinct he had. He was going to find Chun, dead or alive. But, more importantly, he was going to find answers. The Taliban sniper they'd been hunting for weeks had suddenly become the least of their concerns. The real question was whether they were witnessing the emergence of something entirely new in modern warfare, and whether that something was on their side or had its own agenda entirely. Rodriguez checked his weapons and prepared to venture into the darkness. Tomorrow, he would either find the truth or become another casualty in a war that seemed to be writing its own rules. Rodriguez crept through the pre-dawn darkness with Thompson at his side. They'd been moving for 3 hours, following the rough path Chen might have taken toward the south perimeter. Every shadow could hide an enemy fighter. Every rock could conceal a sniper's nest. The landscape told a story of violence. Spent brass casings glinted in the starlight, scattered across positions that showed signs of recent occupation. Bloodstains on rocks marked where wounded fighters had taken cover. But the most troubling discovery was the pattern of the shooting positions. "Sir, look at this," Thompson whispered, kneeling beside a collection of stones arranged in a precise circle. Inside the circle, the ground was compressed in a way that suggested someone had lain there for hours. Range markers. Someone was calculating distances to multiple targets. Rodriguez examined the position. From this spot, a sniper would have clear sight lines to at least 6 different Taliban strongholds across the valley. The mathematics were staggering. The nearest target would be 1,800 meters away. The farthest exceeded 3,000 meters. "Nobody makes those shots," Thompson said, voicing what they were both thinking. "Not consistently. Not with standard equipment." They continued moving, following a trail of evidence that painted an increasingly impossible picture. Each sniper position they discovered showed signs of professional setup and execution. But the distances between positions suggested movement that defied normal human capabilities. As the sky began to lighten, they heard voices. Arabic, spoken in low, urgent tones. Rodriguez signaled for silence, and they approached carefully. 3 Taliban fighters were crouched behind a boulder, apparently tending to a wounded comrade. Rodriguez could understand enough Arabic to catch fragments of their conversation. They were terrified, talking about the demon who shoots through mountains and death that comes from nowhere. One fighter was wounded in the shoulder, babbling about watching his commander's head explode from a bullet that seemed to come from the sky itself. Through hand signals, Rodriguez and Thompson positioned themselves for a simultaneous takedown. They needed prisoners, not bodies. Information was more valuable than bullets right now. The capture was clean and silent. 3 fighters secured, 1 wounded but stable. Rodriguez began interrogation immediately, using his limited Arabic and interpreting gestures to piece together their story. What he learned changed everything. The Taliban sniper they'd been hunting didn't exist. According to the prisoners, their unit had been tracking an American sniper for 2 weeks, but they'd never managed to locate or identify the shooter. Yesterday's systematic destruction of their command structure had come from a single position, approximately 4,000 meters away on a mountain peak they considered impossible to reach undetected. But the most shocking revelation was their description of the shooter. Based on brief glimpses through scopes and binoculars, they described someone small in stature, possibly female, wearing standard American military camouflage. Someone who moved like a ghost and shot like a machine. Rodriguez felt pieces clicking into place. Chin's disappearance, the impossible shots, the systematic elimination of Taliban leadership. But 4,000 meters was beyond the effective range of any standard sniper rifle. Even the most advanced military systems had difficulty maintaining accuracy at such distances. He left Thompson to guard the prisoners and continued alone toward the mountain peak the Taliban fighters had described. The climb was brutal, nearly vertical in places, requiring technical mountaineering skills. It took him 4 hours to reach what appeared to be the shooting position. What he found defied explanation. The position was perfect. A natural depression in the rock provided complete concealment while offering unobstructed views of the entire valley below. Range cards were carved directly into the stone, marking distances to dozens of specific targets. Wind measurement tools were positioned to provide real-time atmospheric data. But most remarkable was the rifle. It wasn't standard military issue. The weapon was a highly modified platform, possibly custom-built, with optics that Rodriguez didn't recognize. The barrel was longer than normal, the stock adjusted for someone significantly shorter than average military height. Ammunition cases scattered around the position were marked with lot numbers he'd never seen. And, sitting calmly beside the weapon, apparently unaware of his approach, was Private Sarah Chun. She didn't turn when he called her name, didn't acknowledge his presence until he was close enough to touch her shoulder. When she finally looked at him, her eyes held an expression he couldn't read. Not guilt, not fear, but something like resignation. "How long have you been here?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Since yesterday evening," Chun replied, her voice as quiet as always. "I needed to stop them before they hurt anyone else." Rodriguez looked down at the valley below. From this height, the Taliban positions looked like toy soldiers scattered across a sandbox. The idea that someone could hit targets from this distance seemed to violate basic physics. "Chun, those shots were impossible. 4,000 meters in mountain conditions with wind shear and temperature gradients. Even world-class competitive shooters couldn't make those shots." Chun finally turned to look at him directly. For the first time since he'd known her, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Captain, you've been asking the wrong question all along. You've been wondering who the sniper is. The better question is what the sniper is." Rodriguez felt something cold settle in his stomach. Chun reached into her pack and pulled out a device he didn't recognize. It looked like a combination computer and targeting system, with displays showing environmental data that updated in real time. "My father was a professor of applied physics at MIT," Chun said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "My mother was a competitive shooter who held 3 world records. I grew up doing mathematical calculations for bullet trajectory before I learned long division." She gestured toward the modified rifle. "This isn't military equipment, Captain. It's a prototype system designed for extreme-range precision shooting. Computer-calculated wind compensation, real-time ballistic adjustment, atmospheric pressure monitoring. It doesn't just make impossible shots possible. It makes them routine." Rodriguez stared at the weapon, then at Chun, then back at the valley below where 12 of America's best marksmen had failed to hit a single target at distances Chun was treating like casual practice. "Why didn't you tell us?" Chun's smile disappeared. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. And because some questions are better answered through demonstration than explanation." Rodriguez sat beside Chun on the rocky ledge, trying to process what he'd learned. The prototype rifle system represented technology years ahead of anything in standard military inventory. But more disturbing was the realization that Chun had been conducting an independent operation under the cover of their mission. "Who authorized this equipment?" Rodriguez asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Nobody authorized it, Captain. My father developed it privately before he died. I've been testing and improving it for 3 years." Chun ran her hand along the rifle's modified stock. The military applications were obvious, but the technology wasn't ready for field deployment until recently. Rodriguez examined the targeting computer more closely. The display showed environmental data updating every few seconds, wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, temperature gradients, barometric pressure, even humidity levels. The system was processing dozens of variables that would take a human shooter minutes to calculate manually. "How many targets did you eliminate yesterday?" 14 confirmed kills, 3 wounded. Chun's voice remained matter-of-fact, as if discussing training exercise results. "All Taliban commanders or experienced fighters. I avoided engaging foot soldiers when possible." Rodriguez did quick mental math. 14 kills from a single position at distances exceeding 3,000 meters represented shooting performance that redefined what was possible in modern warfare. Each shot would have required perfect calculation of dozens of variables, precise timing, and absolute stillness. "The Taliban fighters we captured were terrified. They said you were shooting through mountains." Chun pointed to a ridge approximately 2,800 meters away. "Target was positioned behind that rock formation. I calculated bullet trajectory to skip off the angled stone face and strike the target from above. physics, and geometry, Captain. Every shot has a solution if you have enough computational power. Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Chen wasn't describing marksmanship. She was describing something that resembled artillery more than rifle shooting. Indirect fire using mathematical calculations to hit targets that couldn't be directly engaged. Why join the army? Why not work directly with weapons developers? Chen was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the valley below. When she spoke, her voice carried an edge Rodriguez hadn't heard before. Because weapons developers want to mass-produce simplified versions for ordinary soldiers. They want to remove the human element and create automated systems. I wanted to prove that human intelligence combined with advanced technology could achieve something unprecedented. Rodriguez understood the implication. Chen wasn't just testing a rifle system. She was demonstrating the future of individual warfare, where a single operator with the right equipment could accomplish what previously required entire units. What happens now? Do you report back to the unit and pretend none of this happened? Chen began disassembling her equipment with practiced efficiency. That depends on you, Captain. My mission here is complete. The Taliban operation in this valley has been neutralized. Your men performed exactly as expected. As expected? You mean we were supposed to fail? Chen paused in her packing. Your unit represents the current peak of conventional sniper capability. 12 elite marksmen with standard equipment and traditional training. The fact that you couldn't locate or eliminate a single target from distances exceeding 2,000 meters proves the limitations of current doctrine. Rodriguez felt anger rising in his chest. So we were guinea pigs? Test subjects for your experimental system. You were the control group, Chen corrected. I needed to establish baseline performance before demonstrating what advanced technology could achieve. Your mission briefing was accurate. There was a sniper operating in this area. You just didn't know you were hunting someone with capabilities far beyond normal parameters. Rodriguez stood and walked to the edge of the position, looking down at the scattered evidence of yesterday's long-range shooting. Each target location was marked by disturbed earth where Taliban fighters had taken cover or fallen. The precision was surgical, the coverage complete. How many people know about this technology? Very few. My father shared his research with 3 colleagues before his death. 2 of them work for defense contractors. 1 teaches at West Point. Chen shouldered her modified rifle. This field test will determine whether the technology moves forward into development or gets classified and buried. Rodriguez understood the weight of the moment. Chen had just demonstrated individual capability that could fundamentally change modern warfare. A single operator with her system could accomplish missions that currently required entire companies. But the implications went far beyond tactical advantage. What about the other Taliban sniper? The one we've been tracking for 3 weeks. Chen smiled again, that same unreadable expression. Captain, there was no other Taliban sniper. The kills attributed to him were my work. I've been operating in this area for a month, eliminating high-value targets and gathering intelligence on Taliban operations. Rodriguez felt the world shift beneath his feet. You killed American soldiers? I killed Taliban fighters who were targeting American soldiers, Chen corrected sharply. The 4 deaths attributed to their sniper were Taliban commanders eliminated at distances your investigation teams couldn't explain. Army intelligence assumed they were American casualties because they couldn't conceive of Taliban fighters being eliminated from such ranges. Rodriguez replayed everything he thought he knew about their mission. The ghost sniper had never actually killed Americans. Intelligence reports had been misinterpreted, probably deliberately. The entire operation had been designed to test conventional capabilities against advanced technology under combat conditions. Who else is involved in this? Someone had to arrange our deployment, our orders, our intelligence briefings. Chen finished packing her equipment and stood. People much higher up the chain of command than either of us, Captain. People who make decisions about the future of American military technology. As they began the long descent back to the valley, Rodriguez realized he was facing a choice that would define the rest of his career. He could report Chen's activities as an unauthorized operation using experimental weapons, or he could become part of something that might revolutionize modern warfare. The question wasn't whether Chen's technology worked. The evidence was scattered across the valley below them in the form of eliminated Taliban positions and neutralized threats. The question was whether the military was ready for soldiers who could achieve the impossible. Rodriguez looked back once at the mountain peak where Chun had redefined the limits of individual combat effectiveness. Somewhere in Washington, people were waiting for his report. What he wrote would determine whether the future of warfare had just begun or been buried in classification protocols that would hide it from history. The silent girl had proven her point. Now Rodriguez had to decide what to do with the knowledge that everything he thought he knew about modern combat was obsolete. 3 months later, Rodriguez sat in a sterile conference room in the Pentagon, staring at a classified report that bore his signature. Around the table sat officers whose names appeared in military history books, defense contractors who shaped national security policy, and scientists whose work remained hidden behind layers of classification. The official mission report stated that his unit had successfully eliminated a Taliban sniper cell operating in the Kalar Valley region. 12 confirmed enemy kills, 3 wounded, complete neutralization of hostile forces. Standard language for a successful counter-sniper operation. It mentioned nothing about Private Sarah Chun or her revolutionary technology. "Captain Rodriguez," said General Morrison, a man whose chest displayed ribbons from 4 different conflicts. "Your report indicates exceptional performance under difficult conditions. What's your assessment of your team's readiness for similar operations?" Rodriguez had practiced this answer for weeks. "Sir, the mission highlighted both the capabilities and limitations of current sniper doctrine. Environmental conditions in Afghanistan present unique challenges that require adaptive approaches." It was military speak for everything and nothing. The general nodded approvingly, making notes on his copy of the report. Chin sat 3 seats away from Rodriguez, now wearing the uniform of a lieutenant colonel despite having been a private just months earlier. Her promotion had been retroactive, her service record mysteriously updated to reflect years of classified operations. To anyone reviewing her file, she appeared to be an experienced special operations officer. She'd said nothing during the entire briefing, contributing only when directly questioned about technical aspects of their mission. Her answers were precise, factual, and revealed nothing about the true nature of what had occurred in Afghanistan. "Colonel Chun," the general continued, "your technical assessment mentions experimental protocols that showed promise. Can you elaborate?" Chun glanced briefly at Rodriguez before responding. "Sir, field testing indicated that integration of advanced computational systems with traditional marksmanship training could enhance effective engagement ranges. However, the technology requires significant development before practical deployment." Rodriguez almost smiled. Chun was describing world-changing capability as if it needed minor improvements. Dr. Rebecca Stone, one of the defense contractors, leaned forward. "Colonel, what timeline would you estimate for bringing such systems to operational readiness?" "Unknown, ma'am. The technology involved represents multiple breakthrough innovations. Integration challenges alone would require years of development." Chin's expression remained neutral. "Current prototype systems are unsuitable for widespread deployment." Rodriguez understood what she wasn't saying. The technology worked perfectly. Chin had proven that beyond any doubt. But mass production would require compromises that might destroy what made it revolutionary. Better to keep it classified until the military was ready for what it represented. After the formal briefing, Rodriguez found himself walking through Arlington National Cemetery with Chun. They'd barely spoken since returning from Afghanistan, their interaction limited to official debriefings and classified interviews. But they'd been through something that created an unspoken understanding. "Are you satisfied with how this played out?" Rodriguez asked as they walked between rows of white headstones. Chun was quiet for a long time. The technology proved itself. That was the objective. And now it disappears into black programs and classified research. Better than letting it be rushed into production before anyone understands its implications. Chun stopped beside a headstone marked with the name of a soldier killed in Vietnam. "My father wanted to change warfare. I wanted to prove it could be done responsibly." Rodriguez looked at her profile, trying to reconcile the quiet young woman with the person who had redefined the limits of individual combat capability. "What happens to you now?" "I'm being assigned to a research facility in Nevada. Development of advanced tactical systems." Chin's voice carried no emotion. "Officially, I'll be consulting on theoretical applications. Unofficially, I'll be training the first generation of operators who can use technology like this effectively. Rodriguez understood. Chun would disappear into the black world of military research and development, her innovations hidden behind classification levels that ensured most people would never know she existed. It was probably the right choice, but it felt like a waste of extraordinary talent. Any regrets? Chen turned to look at him directly. Captain, 12 elite American marksmen spent 3 weeks trying to accomplish what I did in one afternoon. That's not because I'm better than them. It's because I had better tools and better information. Rodriguez nodded. The future of warfare. Part of it. But technology is only as good as the person using it. What we proved in Afghanistan is that human intelligence combined with advanced systems can achieve things that neither could accomplish alone. Chen began walking again. The question is whether the military is ready for soldiers who can think like scientists and fight like machines. As they continued through the cemetery, Rodriguez reflected on how the mission had changed his understanding of modern conflict. Chen had demonstrated capabilities that made traditional tactics obsolete. But, more importantly, she'd shown that the future belonged to people who could bridge the gap between human intuition and technological possibility. One more question, Rodriguez said as they reached the cemetery entrance. That shot from 4,000 meters. The one that took out the Taliban commander while he was behind cover. Was that really possible, or was it just incredibly lucky? Chen smiled for the third time since Rodriguez had known her. Captain, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I'd been calculating that shot for 6 hours, waiting for the wind conditions to align perfectly. When the target moved into the optimal position, physics took care of the rest. Rodriguez watched her walk away, disappearing into the crowd of tourists and military personnel visiting Arlington. In a few years, stories would emerge about impossible shots made by unknown snipers in distant conflicts. Military historians would debate whether such shots were possible. Technology would advance in ways that seemed to leap forward rather than evolve gradually. But very few people would ever know about the silent girl who had proven that the future of individual warfare was limited only by human imagination and the courage to redefine what was possible. Rodriguez returned to his unit, where 12 elite marksmen continued to represent the peak of conventional capability. They were still the best at what they did. But what they did was no longer the limit of what could be done. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, Chun was probably calculating impossible shots and training soldiers to achieve the unprecedented. And somewhere in classified laboratories, scientists were working to understand how a 19-year-old private had managed to change the nature of modern warfare with a custom rifle and a computer that could predict the future trajectory of bullets flying through mathematical space. The ghost sniper had finally been identified. She was the future, and she was just getting started.